A kid ran up to me in the mall, grabbed my hand and said, "Pretend you're my mom. Please help me." His voice shook so badly that it stopped me cold. When I looked up, I saw a man standing near the escalators, with his eyes locked on us, watching every movement we made. The boy leaned closer and whispered, "He's following children." Hearing those words felt like a punch to the stomach. My name is Raina Keller. I'm 33, a teacher's aide, and the kind of person who jumps up the second a child cries. My mom, Dana, raised me to protect kids the same way she did as a teacher for 30 years. My brother Seth is a firefighter, and he never lets me forget how fast a situation can turn dangerous. I had no idea that when that child grabbed my hand, one choice I made would end up saving 12 kids. I was at the mall that afternoon to buy a birthday present for my niece, Rowan. I was in a good mood, thinking about the smile she'd have when she opened her gift. The mall was busy with families, teenagers, and weekend shoppers. Nothing unusual or alarming. I walked past the toy store and pulled out my phone to text my mom about dinner plans. Everything felt normal, calm, and familiar. As I moved toward the next store, I felt a small hand latch onto mine. I looked down expecting a child who had wandered away from their parent. Instead, I saw a boy with wide, frightened eyes staring up at me. His face was pale, and his breathing was tight. He gripped my hand with so much strength that it surprised me. Before I could even ask his name, he whispered, "Pretend you're my mom." His voice cracked like he was holding back tears. I knelt slightly and asked, "Are you hurt? Where are your parents?" He stepped closer and whispered again, this time faster and shakier, "He's following children. Please don't let him take me." My heart jumped. I turned my head slowly and scanned the area. That was when I saw him. A tall man in his 40s stood about 20 feet away, pretending to scroll on his phone, but his eyes never left the boy. His stare was cold and fixed, like he was waiting for an opening. The boy trembled beside me, and I felt a wave of protective instinct rush through me. I tightened my grip on his hand and said quietly, "You're safe with me. I'm not letting go." If you're watching this, hit subscribe and comment where you're watching from, so I can welcome you to the channel. The moment I told Kai he was safe with me, I felt the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders, in a way I had never felt before. His small hand trembled against mine, and I could sense that whatever he had been running from was real and immediate. I kept my body slightly in front of his, trying to shield him from the view of the man across the mall walkway. The man's stare never moved, not even for a second. His posture stayed relaxed, but his eyes followed every shift in our movements. Something about the way he stood there made my skin prickle. It was the kind of stillness predators have when they wait for the perfect moment to act. I lowered my voice and asked Kai his name again to calm him down. He whispered, "It's Kai," and swallowed hard. I asked where his mom was, and his lower lip shook as he said he had gotten separated when they were walking from the parking lot. He said the man started shadowing them inside the mall, circling near the stores where families gathered. He noticed the man staring at his younger sister, so he moved closer to his mom. When he lost sight of her, the man suddenly moved toward him. That was when Kai panicked and ran. As he talked, he kept glancing over his shoulder, scared the man would get closer. I wanted to tell him everything would be fine, but I didn't know that for sure. I scanned the mall again, trying to memorize every detail. Families were browsing through stores, teenagers were taking selfies, and parents pushed strollers along the walkway. Everything looked normal on the surface, but the man's presence brought a sharp sense of danger that cut through the everyday noise. He pretended to look at a kiosk selling phone cases, angling himself just enough to keep us in view. I shifted, so my back was to him, pretending to talk casually to Kai, but I kept watching him through the reflections on the store window beside us. The man moved the moment we did, making gradual steps in our direction. My heart pounded harder as I realized this was not a random misunderstanding. I needed to think fast. I tightened my grip on Kai's hand and said, "Stay with me. We're going to look for your mom together." My voice sounded steady, but inside I was terrified. I reached into my purse and pretended to check my messages, but instead I pulled up my camera and pointed it discreetly toward the man. I hit record just in case something happened. When I lifted my head again, he was closer, only about 10 steps away now. He kept his expression neutral, but there was something unsettling about the way he watched Kai. I moved toward the nearest store entrance, pushing aside a display rack to make space for both of us. The man slowed as we stepped inside, but stayed near the doorway, pretending to read a poster. Kai clung to my arm so tightly that it almost hurt, and I knew he was on the edge of panic. I whispered, "I'm not leaving you. I promise." I guided him deeper into the store and pretended to browse while giving us distance from the front. The store was crowded enough that someone watching from outside might lose track of us for a moment. I used that small window of safety to speak quietly to Kai. I asked if the man said anything to him. Kai nodded and said the man tried asking him if he was alone. He told Kai he had something to show him outside the mall. Hearing that made anger rise through the fear. This man had been hunting for an opportunity, and Kai had been 1 second away from being pulled outside before I ran into him. I knew I could not stay hidden long. The man would start looking inside stores once he realized we were no longer visible. I peeked toward the front just in time to see him walk past the entrance, scanning inside with slow, deliberate movements. He was circling, searching, calculating. My next steps had to be fast and smart. I pulled Kai behind a rack of jackets, knelt down to his level, and looked him in the eyes. "We're finding help right now," I told him. "You did the right thing running to me. You're not alone anymore." His eyes filled with tears, but he nodded bravely. The weight of the moment pressed down on me. I was no longer dealing with a scared child at the mall. I was dealing with a man who had been studying kids and waiting for the perfect opportunity, and he was not done yet. I stood, held Kai close, and stepped back out into the mall walkway, ready to face whatever came next. When I stepped back into the mall walkway with Kai gripping my arm, I knew hiding was no longer enough. The man was still somewhere close, and every second we waited gave him another chance to close the distance between us. My heart raced as I scanned the crowds, looking for the safest direction to move. I tried to keep my voice calm when I told Kai, "We're going to find help. Stay right beside me." He nodded quickly and pressed himself against me, his small steps working to match mine. I guided him toward the center of the mall, where the foot traffic was heavier. The more people around us, the less chance the man had to approach without being seen. As we walked, I pulled out my phone and opened the mall's website, scrolling until I found the customer service number. My hands were shaking as I pressed call. When someone answered, I lowered my voice and said, "I have a child with me who is being followed. We need security right now." The operator's tone shifted immediately, and she asked for our location. I glanced at the restaurants and benches nearby and told her we were in the main atrium. She said officers were on their way and told me not to leave the crowded area. I turned slowly, trying to see if the man was in sight. For a moment, I didn't see him. I thought maybe he had given up, but then my stomach sank. On the second level, near the railing, he stood watching us. He leaned over the edge as if trying to hear something, studying the path we were taking with a cold, focused expression. I felt Kai's grip tighten as he followed my gaze. The man started walking toward the escalator with steady confidence, clearly intent on coming back down to our level. I needed to act before he got close again. I turned to Kai and said, "We are moving toward the family lounge. Security is meeting us there." It was the direction the operator had recommended, and I trusted her judgment. Kai stayed glued to my side as we moved through the crowd. Every so often he whispered, "Is he still coming?" I told him not to look, that I would handle it, but I checked constantly, watching for any sign of him. I saw him reach the bottom of the escalator and look around with slow, careful movements. He was trying to track us by behavior, not clothing, which meant he was experienced. My fear sharpened into determination. We quickened our steps, passing a group of teenagers near the smoothie stand, and that was when Kai pointed toward the arcade entrance across the hall. "He talked to a girl over there earlier," he said quietly. I looked and saw several kids running in and out of the bright, noisy arcade with no adults close by. The realization hit me fast and hard. Kai was not the only child he had been watching. This man had been circling the mall scouting for opportunities. That knowledge pushed me into a higher level of urgency. I pulled Kai close and said, "Don't stop for anything. We're almost there." We turned toward the hallway that led to the family lounge, the place with restrooms and a small play area, one of the safest sections in the mall because it had cameras and security access points. I checked behind us and saw the man weaving through the shoppers, moving faster now but trying not to look suspicious. A woman with a stroller crossed in front of him, forcing him to slow down, and I took that chance to create more distance. When I saw the family lounge sign ahead, relief washed over me, followed by another spike of fear when I realized we had to walk through a narrower hallway to reach it. Narrow spaces meant fewer people. Narrow spaces meant more risk. I gripped my phone and speed dialed my brother Seth. When he answered, I told him quickly, "A man is following a child. Security is on the way, but I need you to stay on the phone." His voice became firm instantly as he told me to stay visible, walk with confidence, and not let the man cut us off. With his voice grounding me, I moved faster. We turned into the hallway, and almost immediately, 2 mall security officers appeared at the end of it, heading straight toward us. The sight of them brought an overwhelming sense of safety. Kai let out a shaky breath, and I felt some of the tension in his shoulders ease. But even with them ahead of us, I checked behind one more time. The man had just stepped into the hallway entrance, his expression tightening when he saw security approaching. He slowed, but stayed there, watching us with a look that told me he still believed he had a chance. That look cemented everything for me. There was no turning back. There was no pretending this was a misunderstanding. I was now the barrier between a dangerous man and a frightened child, and I was ready to see this through. As soon as I saw the 2 mall security officers heading toward us, a wave of relief washed through me, but it lasted only a second because I knew the man was still behind us. I kept Kai close to my side as we moved down the hallway, trying not to draw attention, but also refusing to slow down. The officers' expressions shifted when they noticed my urgency. One of them called out, "Ma'am, is this the child you reported?" I nodded without breaking stride and pointed behind me. "He's following us," I said. "He's right there." The officers exchanged a quick look and immediately picked up their pace. Kai clung to me so tightly that his nails pressed into my skin, but I didn't mind. I pulled him in front of me and said, "Stay with the officers. Don't look back." The man hesitated at the entrance of the hallway like he was calculating his next move. He paused for only a moment, but it felt like an entire minute as I watched him decide whether to continue forward or disappear into the crowd. His body stiffened. Then he stepped forward again with a quiet confidence that terrified me. The officers called out for him to stop. He ignored them, pretending he hadn't heard. One officer repeated the command louder and moved toward him. That was when the man tried to turn away. He shifted his shoulder and angled his body as if he planned to slip back into the mall walkway. The officers reacted instantly. They broke into a run, reaching him before he could escape. One grabbed his wrist while the other blocked his path. The man tensed but didn't fully resist at first, acting confused like he had no idea why they were approaching him. He said something about being lost, but his voice carried a false calm that chilled me. Kai pressed himself against the younger officer who had walked up to us, burying his face into her side. The officer comforted him, but she kept her eyes locked on the situation happening a few feet away. The man tried to pull his arm free, saying he hadn't done anything wrong. His tone sharpened when he realized they were not accepting his excuses. He shifted again, this time in a way that made both officers tighten their hold. One of them told him, "We have received multiple reports about your behavior today. You need to step to the side and answer our questions." Instead of complying, he twisted quickly, as if he were about to sprint. The hall filled with the sound of a struggle as both officers forced him against the wall. He dropped a black backpack in the process, and it hit the floor with a heavy thud. That thud made me flinch because I knew whatever was inside was not something innocent. A crowd began to gather at the end of the hallway, parents pulling their children closer, teenagers filming from a distance, adults whispering in confusion as they watched the officers wrestle the man into cuffs. Once he was restrained, One officer stepped back and grabbed the backpack. He opened it carefully while the other officer kept the man pinned against the wall. When the zipper finally slid open, I watched the officer's face change. He reached inside and pulled out a bundle of small toys that looked like they were meant to gain trust quickly. Stickers, little trinkets, things you hand to a child to make them follow you without question. Beneath those items were several folded papers. The officer unfolded one and froze. Then he handed it to the other officer. I stepped closer, my breath catching in my chest when I saw the list of children's names scrawled across the page. Each name had a description beside it: age, hair color, clothing. At the bottom was a line that made my knees weaken. Targets for Saturday. Today was Saturday. The officers shared a look of alarm before one of them turned to me and asked, "Did the boy mention anyone else?" I nodded and said, "He said the man was watching children near the arcade and the fountain earlier." The officer stepped away immediately and radioed for backup, telling security to sweep those areas and look for any children who were alone or separated from their families. He reported the list, emphasizing that there were several names on it. The realization of how many kids were in danger made my stomach twist. Within minutes, more officers and mall staff spread out across the building. I stayed with Kai and the officer while she tried to gather more information from him without overwhelming him. He pointed toward the arcade and said he was waiting near the entrance watching kids go in. The officers confirmed that several children had been identified as potential targets based on the notes found in the backpack. Some were already being reunited with their parents. Others were being located by staff. As the officers walked the man out of the hallway in handcuffs, he turned and looked at us with a stare that felt empty and calculating. Knowing he was finally caught made my fear fade into relief, but that look stayed with me. When the mall security supervisor approached and said, "Your call just saved a lot of kids today," I felt something heavy lift off my chest. I held Kai's hand and whispered, "You're safe now." And at that moment, I finally believed it. The moment the officers walked the man away in handcuffs, the hallway finally felt safe enough for me to breathe again. But the weight of everything that had just happened still sat heavy on my chest. Kai stayed close to my leg, holding on to me as if he was afraid the world might shift again if he let go. When his mother arrived a few minutes later, she ran toward him so fast she almost fell. She dropped to her knees, wrapped her arms around him, and cried into his hair with a kind of relief that made my own eyes sting. I stepped back to give them space, but Kai kept one hand on my wrist, like he didn't want me to leave yet. His mother looked up at me with a face full of gratitude and shock. She said, "I don't know what would have happened if you weren't here." And I could barely respond because the reality of that truth settled deep into my stomach. Mall security asked us to walk with them to their office so they could take our statements. The room was small and bright, with monitors showing every corner of the mall. An officer handed me a bottle of water, and I realized my hands were still shaking. Kai sat beside me while his mother explained how they got separated when she bent down to tie his sister's shoe. She said she turned around, and he was gone. Her voice broke every few sentences, and I could hear the guilt in every word. I told her Kai did exactly what he needed to do. He found someone he thought could keep him safe. That seemed to calm her a little, but she still held onto his shoulders as if she were afraid he might disappear again. When the lead officer came in with their findings, the entire room went quiet. He explained that the man had been watching children for over an hour, circling from one end of the mall to the other. He had approached at least 2 children earlier, but their parents arrived at the last second. The pages in his backpack contained notes about 12 kids, including descriptions of what they wore and the places he spotted them. He also had old mall maps marked with circles around family areas, play zones, and entrances where quick exits were possible. Hearing all of that made my stomach drop. The officer said, "If you hadn't stepped in when you did, he might have gotten away with one of them." I looked at Kai and then at the monitors showing families walking through the mall, unaware of how close they had come to losing something precious. The thought made my throat tighten. They also pulled up footage showing the man trailing Kai earlier, watching him with the same cold, patient stare he had given us in the hallway. Seeing it on the screen made everything feel even more real. After giving our statements, Kai reached for my hand again and whispered, "Thank you for helping me." His voice was soft but steady now, and hearing those words made every moment of fear worth it. His mother hugged me and wouldn't let go for several seconds. She said she wanted my number so she could thank me properly when she calmed down, and I told her she didn't owe me anything, but she insisted. When security finally escorted them out, I sat alone for a moment, letting the adrenaline drain out of me. My legs felt weak, and my chest felt heavy, but underneath all of that was a deep sense of clarity. I called my brother Seth next. He answered on the first ring, and when I told him everything was okay, he let out a long breath that sounded like he had been holding it for too long. He said, "I'm proud of you, Raina. You trusted your instincts and you saved that kid's life." Hearing my brother say those words grounded me in a way I needed. When I got home later that evening, I told my mom everything. She cried at the part where Kai grabbed my hand and begged me to pretend to be his mom. She sat beside me and said, "You were meant to be there today. You made the right choice." That night, I kept thinking about how easy it would have been to brush Kai off, to assume he was being dramatic, or that a parent was nearby. But something inside me recognized the fear in his voice, and acting on that instinct made all the difference. I learned that danger does not always announce itself with loud alarms. Sometimes it walks in plain sight, wearing a calm expression and blending into a crowd. And sometimes the smallest decision can change the course of more than one life. I still check crowds differently now and pay closer attention to the children around me, not out of fear, but because I now understand how much it matters to see what others overlook. And even if no one ever knows what happened that day, I know the truth. One small act kept 12 children safe, and that is something I will carry for the rest of my life. If you made it to the end of this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you are watching from, so I can greet you personally.